Welcome to episode 2 of Sullivan Street. I am Eric Vogelsang, and today we're going to rank and get into the Counting Crows' most famous, I guess, or popular album as far as units sold goes, August and Everything After. But first, let's talk to our co-hosts. As always, we have Chris Miggs. Chris, how are you today?
Hey, I'm good. I'm really appreciative of the positive feedback we got on the first episode. Glad people enjoyed it, and glad to start kind of down the journey of looking at looking at the records, looking at the different things we want to discuss, and really diving in. And really glad to have a couple of guests today to do that with us.
Yes, we could not, a record that started it all, if you will, we could not do that without, and if we're doing the quote unquote official ranking, tongue in cheek, we couldn't do that without two more super fans. And so the first, let us introduce Jeremie Harris from Arizona. Jeremie, how are you today? And also, well, anyway, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really happy to be here, and I appreciate you guys including me in this episode here.
No, and thank you for joining us. So, can you tell us a bit about, we like to ask everybody, what got you into Counting Crows? What brought you to it? Why do you keep coming back? Why did you write me and say, hey, this podcast is great?
Yeah, sure. So for me, it was around late high school. Mr. Jones was on the radio all over the place, and everybody was talking about how much they loved it. And this was a time in my life when I started really getting into the lyrics of a song and really looking a little bit deeper into it. It wasn't just the poppy radio stuff I wanted to hear. And what kind of drew me to it was that all these people are saying, this is such a great song. It's so happy. They're dancing around at the school dances. And for me, somebody who's trying to look a little bit deeper into the lyrics, I'm thinking this is not a happy song. This is kind of an awful song. Not that it's an awful song, but just the message behind it is so much sadder than the tone of the song comes across if you're not paying attention. And then I just kind of listened to the whole album all the way through, and that was one of the first albums I think in my life where I could listen to it, cover to cover, and just enjoy all of it. And that's what really stood out to me, and kind of what kept me coming back for more with the Counting Crows.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it is. In like
Chris, you have a comment?
re-listening to the record, it's sort of and obviously we'll get into like we're ranking these songs, but the song that I have 11th would probably be my favorite song from a bunch of different bands. It is one of those still like classic kind of all the way through records.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Chris. And let's go to our other guest. Here we go. Dan Pilling, originally from the UK. Say hello,
Yeah.
Dan.
Hey, thanks for having me. So, I grew up in the UK, but now live in Seattle, Washington. Been here for about 8.5 years. I got exposed to the Crows while I was at school as well, and I remember a Q magazine, which was a music magazine in the UK, and every month they would produce a CD on the magazine, and it would have a set of songs, and this magazine, this particular one, had 14 songs, had the likes of Jamiroquai, Oasis, Stone Roses, and at number 14 on this album was Round Here by Counting Crows, and it just blew me away. And I can still remember where I was the very first time I played that CD, and that got me hooked for life. I didn't get to see them the first time they came to the UK, but did get to see them when they were covering the Satellites tour, and they played the Royal Albert Hall, which is a significant music venue in the UK. So just been hooked since then, and 38 concerts later, I've got 2 more lined up this summer, and just love them.
Great, thanks so much. The kind of super fans we're looking for.
And I will say, I used to love like getting those those music magazines that had CDs attached to them, especially because in the US, if you saw like Q or any of the other ones that had that, it was an import. This is what's happening on the other side of the pond. You know what I mean? It was always a very, very, very big deal. I miss those. Those CDs were kind of awesome. I guess they just take playlists now, but it's not quite the same.
So let's now get into August and Everything After, why we are all here today. As I said, the album that started it all. So first, I guess, before we start ranking them, let's go one by one and talk about, I guess, our first exposure to the album as a whole, or why you bought it, how you bought it, if you remember. Was there a particular single that attracted you to go buy it? Dan, let's go back to you.
Yeah, I mean, Round Here introduced me to the band, and then I bought the album. And for me, it's my favorite album of all time. It's an album I tend to gift to people. It's just, for me, it's just a fantastic album from start to finish, and it's up there for me.
What's the best experience you've had gifting it to someone?
I think people then buying me concert tickets and taking me to a concert. So I had a good friend of mine, and he bought tickets for the next tour and didn't tell me, and then was like, "Hey, what are you doing the weekend? Not much. We're going to go see Counting Crows." So I think that's probably the best. Yeah. Has anyone else had anything like that?
That's a great idea to gift the CD or whatever. Even I guess now you have to gift the MP3, but I love the idea of forcing. Yeah, I did randomly a lot, not for this, but just along the same lines. I forced somebody recently to listen to Holiday in Spain like 6 months ago, and he's like, "Oh yeah, it's good." He just wrote me this week and said, "You know what? That song is really, 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 really good," and they're not a Cruz fan. So, Jeremy, what about you? What about your memory with August and everything after?
So I distinctly remember that this was the first album I ever bought on cassette, and then immediately followed up and bought the CD after I got my CD player, which was, probably only a couple months apart. And that took me down the long rabbit hole of replacing all of these old tapes that I had. But what August and everything after means to me, it's a CD that I'll get out and play for people, and just talk to them about what the songs mean to me, like we're going to do, here today. And I think you can really learn a lot about a person through their interpretation of a song, right?
Mm.
So you want them to be fans also, but not just that. You just want them to understand how you feel about the music, how this music makes you feel, and maybe if you can give some insight into the writing of the song. I know Adam gives us some snippets sometimes about his thought process, and I like to share just some extra knowledge with the people that listen to the song with me.
Fantastic. Yeah, I like what you said about it tells a lot about the personality, about how they interpret the song. I guess maybe this is what I don't want our listeners to know about my psyche once we get into some of the what kind of deep thoughts are in his mind.
Yeah, it's
But
not always the best.
Chris, what about yourself?
So I think I'm a little bit an outlier of the group here in that as I may have mentioned on the last show, I think, but yeah, I didn't, I heard the songs initially, on the radio, Mr. Jones around here, but I was a little bit younger. I was 10 when the record came out, so 10, 11 when the record was really, really big, and I didn't buy it at the time. I ended up buying Recovering the Satellites and had sort of a longer sort of journey. And I went back and bought the record when I was a freshman in college. And part of the thing that did strike me in listening to the record again for however many at the time, but listening to it as I was ranking it this week was it kind of makes sense to me in retrospect because that I didn't latch onto it when I was younger, because it's kind of a record you need to have like lived and had some experiences for. Like what a lot of this is speaking to is these feelings, and I think it's a very great sort of late high school, like college record, because all these feelings of trying to figure out who you are and maybe being a little ashamed of that sometimes, and maybe not liking who you are, but like wanting to connect with people. That kind of comes out in the themes of it. That kind of makes it's like, whoa, that's really hits you if you're 19. Maybe I don't think would have hit me all the way through when I was 11. But yeah, bought that Ardmore Music in suburban Philadelphia. If anyone, I think they're still around. I think they moved a little bit further down the road. I think Ardmore Music is like technically in Bryn Mawr now. But if you ever find yourself driving down, I-30 in suburban Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Lancaster Ave.
No, you make a good point. I'm sure we'll talk about that throughout here in the podcast about this coming of it. You're exact. I was trying to think when I've heard Adam interviewed recently about like why the album resonates with individuals and why they're still super fan, because it is kind of a coming of age album. And I like what you said, because even yes, there are the teeny bopper pop songs that talk about love, and a lot of songs talk about love. But this is, the love I think that he talks about in this album is that first. I don't know how to say, right? True, but maybe first love you have as a right? Is it mature, right? A mature, maybe 19-year-old compared to a 15-year-old, where you have that complication of trying to figure out who you are exactly, and trying to figure yourself, right? You're out, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I thought about this, and I think I'd like to think I have a photographic memory, and I could not. And like you, Jeremy, I also had the tape, and then and I actually thought about this. This was the first album. I think I've ranked. I think I mentioned here that I've had it. I think I've had like 5 different copies of it, and not that I bought multiple because I had the tape, and then I think at some point I eventually got the CD. I guess maybe a year later, because you're right, it was on that cusp. And I had the CD. I'm right, and I think at the time I only had right. My only CD player also had a tape, and then the car had the tape. So I thought, why do I need a CD? But I'm like, well, I like the album so much, I'll just have to buy the CD. And then my friend, as I mentioned in the first podcast, my best friend from high school, he got me the. I don't know if any of you seen. I guess it was the first remaster, and it was gold plated. I don't know if any of you
the
saw that.
mobile fidelity, the sound map,
Yes,
right?
yes. And he knew I was such a diehard fan. And then someone was like, oh, it's just the same CD, but better.
Does it sound better?
No, not at least in my system, because right. But I loved having it because it was such a special album for me. So I don't remember. And then I got the and now that's the one I own. I bought the deluxe edition because it has all the extra tracks. And then I kind of joke and bought the MP3 of what is it, Live at Town Hall. So it's basically, of course, it's different. But I said, yeah, I've had 5. So I don't remember actually buying the tape. The other ones I kind of remember getting at certain times, but yes, I kind of said the last time. I guess my memory is just that it kind of hooked me, and I guess I've had other albums that every song is great. I mean, you go back to even I don't know Michael Jackson's Thriller or something. You can say, well, every song here is really good, or some of the I don't know. I like the Beastie Boys' first album. I was like, but there's something about this at all levels, and I was just like, this is incredible. And then it wasn't until subsequent releases that I realized that maybe how special the band was, but I knew that this particular album was special. So, okay, so let's start off with the official rankings. Cannot. By the way, of course, as a lot of you said when you sent me your rankings ahead of time, you're like, this changed from last year. This was debating 4, 5, and 7 for 3 hours this week. So obviously these lists change, and if we had different fans on, or if we talked to us, I know that if you had me write the list a year ago, it would have been, or 5 years ago, it would have been different. Chris, does your list change a lot?
Well, what I did this very unscientific because I knew if I would take like the whole week if I really tried to really break it down. So what I did was I kind of I listened to the record and I sort of ranked it as it went. I tried to sort of just kind of put it and let that feeling in the moment sort of resonate. And I was kind of surprised at a couple of them. I was surprised at a couple of things that came out lower than I thought, which I'll guess we'll talk about. But I'm curious. We would start. What is number 11, and then we'll start talking about where we had it and what's our number 11 song here.
All right, will do. All right, number 11 on our list, the lowest ranking, but it's like ranking your children, right? You love them all, just some better than others. All right, so number 11, which 2 of us had as their lowest ranking song, and another 2 had it, also pretty low, but not the last, was Ghost Train. So Dan, why don't you start off commenting about Ghost Train, why you ranked it, or just any other memories of the song or anything?
Yeah, I think to your point, firstly, I don't think there's a bad song on the album. So it's tough to choose as you kind of go through this stuff. The other thing that had a big influence on me is when hearing them live, I think they have a higher impact on my list. And Ghost Train is one that doesn't tend to get played as often live. So I've got a recording of it, but I don't have a live experience in my head of it. And that's kind of why I put it at number 11, just because 11 great songs, but there always has to be one at 11, and Ghost Train's mine.
Absolutely. Jeremy, what about yourself?
I actually had it ranked at 11 as well. I was kind of surprised. I thought I was going to be the outlier here and I was going to get beat up, but I'm kind of glad to see that's not the case. It is a good song, like we said. It's just it doesn't resonate with me quite the same way that some of the others do. I just don't find it quite as relatable, and maybe I just don't know the deeper meaning behind it. But it's not one that I'll skip, but it's never been one of my favorites either.
Yeah, I had it at number 10, so just a slight step above. And yeah, it's not a bad song at all. I kind of like the lyrics to it. The idea of like is a love is a ghost train, like you're dragging all these like things behind you when you're with someone, which is kind of nice. It's kind of not nice, but it's kind of interesting. Remember everything she says when only memory remains is a pretty good line. But yeah, just as a live, it's kind of, I don't know. It's not as exciting a song musically. It doesn't sort of. I feel like some of the other songs have, in addition to the lyrics, some musical moments that are really like spectacular. And I feel like Ghost Train is a good song. There's nice, just a couple of live. There's some good guitar solos there, but it doesn't. Again, this doesn't hit me the same way as some of the other ones.
Yeah, I gotta rework my spreadsheet to see what songs I've seen live, and most of them I know, but I don't think I saw Ghost Train live. But it's interesting, Dan, when you commented about the live, that Ghost Train, of course, is, and we'll mention this in a future episode, is in the Across the Wire. So that is one where they tried to play it a little different. Like you, Chris. So I had it. I guess I want to say much higher. I had it number 8. So I think I even remember writing my friend Todd like 12 years ago and saying Ghost Train might be their most underrated song from that album. So I've always known that I had it a little higher than others. And like you said, Chris, that actually line about like only memories remain or something, that line I think is not, I don't know if it's one of his best, but it certainly haunted me and still haunts me a little bit to this day. This idea of, right, every day that we go, anything else is in the past than what you remember about it. And sometimes you don't remember things. And then it's almost like it never happened, right? Or if you have someone in your family struggling with Alzheimer's or something like that. And when you think about, right, relationships that end, the only thing you have are memories after that. I also think this is kind of esoteric, but I almost think that kind of chorus, how do you do? That's tough to. I don't know if I ever heard anybody cover it. I think that would be really tough to sing. I think I'm not even saying it's the best chorus, but I don't think anybody could sing it better than Adam. Like the tone and pitch wise, I was re-listening to that. I'm like, that takes a lot of skill to sing it how he did. I don't know. Just kind of a random thought.
It is also interestingly, because the point about the live, it is the next to last played song in terms of plays, at least according to setlist.fm, which I think is relatively accurate.
That's right.
And the lowest one, I actually think it's a little bit of a asterisk, because the one that's lowest is Raining in Baltimore, which of course is an alternate many times, and probably if you tally up the alternates, because they played that a lot, like probably would be ahead, of Ghost Train. So Ghost Train is sort of the low man on the totem pole in that regard. Although there's a couple that are surprisingly close. I will talk about them as we get there, but just interesting point that it is one.
No, that is interesting. That Ghost Train and Raining in Baltimore probably are played the least amount. And okay, so here we go now, number 10. And I guess I'll preface by saying that I think by casual listeners, particularly the rank of all 4 of us together, this was probably the most surprising ranking. So coming in at number 10, some people had it at their lowest, some people quite higher, is played all the time in concert, which would be Omaha. So Dan, talk first about Omaha, and you might be surprised because you had it fairly high.
Yeah, super surprised, and it's funny because the tour is kicking off in Omaha, and I'm due to go.
So
my bucket list item is I want to hear them play Omaha in Omaha, but
yes,
knowing Adam, he could choose not to.
He will. I
played it a lot. So recently.
I love that song, especially live. When you've got that accordion with Charlie at the front. When he comes to the front of the stage, and so for me, that was my number 5.
Oh, interesting.
Let's
I had it.
Jeremy.
I had
Oh,
it
no,
number
sorry. I was gonna
11.
say.
I would say I had it number 11, and really just because, in part, I think they've kind of like overplayed it a little bit live. That I feel like a little bit I've lost. If there was a different time where they were playing it less frequently, I feel like it's lost some of its luster to me. Maybe just because I've heard it so many times in concert.
Hey, Jeremy, what about you and your ranking of Omaha?
I actually had it at number 10, so I'm sticking true to form here so far with our average. Again, I like the song. If it comes on the radio, I will listen to it and I will sing every word of it. And same thing in concert. I love hearing it. It's just, to me, it almost sounds like it was written just for radio, to be a radio single, and I'm not actually sure if it ever was. But it just comes across as very poppy to me, which is okay. But it just, again, kind of like with Ghost Train, I just don't feel the meaning behind it as much as some of the others. And again, a great song. I don't want to bash it. If anybody's listening and they're a big Omaha fan, don't send me hate mail. But just doesn't do it for me like some of the others.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's I will say so too. Like, the lyrical aspect of it, I do think that's part of why it's down. Like, in just in terms of like connections to the lyrics are great, but don't connect to me the same way.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. I was gonna before we went to the rankings, I was actually going to say a couple things about the album. But one of them that I was going to say is, at least that I did with my quick reference check, because I had to check myself. Obviously, I knew Mr. Jones and Round Here were official singles, but I guess official singles were Mr. Jones, Round Here, then Omaha, then Rain King, and actually Murder of One, at least in some places, in some markets, where it was released as a single. So I think the only three I heard on the radio were Mr. Jones, Around Here, and Rain King. I had Omaha, actually. I'm with you, Dan. I had it higher. And in fact, I think if you asked me like 3 years ago, I might have had it as number four. But I knocked it down to number six. So I still had it right in the middle. And the one thing I agree with what you say about the lyrics, etc. And I also agree with what Dan says about being a crowd favorite. I'm starting to warm to songs that are a crowd favorite. I think the according is amazing and so uniquely Counting Crows. And I remember the first time I saw Omaha live, and Imi did play that mandolin part, that little stringing in the middle, and I was like, okay, this is going to be a great concert. They have all the little touches. I mean, they do some of the little important touches, but at the same time change things also, right? That they kind of have that great mix. So I had that, and the only thing I'll say about Omaha, and I had it number six, that I am not sure how or why that song works, right? There's other songs that you're like, hey, I know why this is great and why this is a single. I wouldn't, I mean, it's funny that Jeremy said that about it being a single, because I probably wouldn't have chose it as a single if I was a record exec. But yeah, somehow the song works. So a genius to the Crows there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so no other comments about Omaha. Let's move to number 9. And this one was one of the few universal, although one person had it a little higher, but it was kind of universally about the same ranking, which is Time and Time Again. So let's go with Dan on that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's good, but it's not on the top list for me. It almost, I mean, I don't participate, but it reminds me of like a stoner song, the sort of thing you'd have on and you were just chilling out, and yeah. But it's not near the top for me.
Jeremy, what about yourself? Time and Time Again?
I actually had that one as number 9 as well. And I think, high school me loved this song. It just sounds like a kind of a typical breakup song. But the more time has passed and you've heard some of these other breakup songs and relationship songs that Adam has done, this one just feels so inferior compared to some of those. What I do really love about it, though, is the line, "I wanted to see you walking backwards to get the sensation of you coming home." I think that's a great line. It's just not in one of his better songs, in my opinion.
Yep, no, that is a classic line. How about you, Chris?
Ooh, so let's see. First one where I'm a little bit off the group here, because I have this number 5. I have always I really love this song, and I love the music to this song. The outros to it, the bridges, the "When Are You Coming Home" bridge is pretty great, and the way it kind of plays out. I have a really distinct recollection of seeing this song at a show in Hershey, Pennsylvania in 2006. And maybe because probably the kind of the first time I had like really, really good tickets, part of it. But like, and just that whole show, I, I'm sure if you listen back to it, you'd go, this is just a normal show. But maybe where my mind was at the time, that show just really hit me like a train, and particularly time and time again, really like hit me like a ton of bricks. Yeah, I think it's great, and it's interesting. I asked my wife last night. I was like, just out of curiosity, what's your number one on this record? And she had this number one.
Wow.
So I would imagine, again, this is where, literally everyone's going to have hate mail for all of us, probably, or at least hopefully not hate mail, but a disagreeing comment. Yeah, I think it's a great song, and just a glimpse into sort of the genius of how these songs are uniquely kind of constructed, that like they could have these the way they move. It's so unique in that regard. But
Yeah, I'm with you. I had that, I think for a while, this moved up a little bit on mine. I think, and I appreciate your thoughts. I think when I was younger, this might have been the lowest ranked song, and it's kind of moved up. I had it number 9. So, yeah, I think, Chris, you kind of summed up what I like about the song. I mean, I have to admit, is I know that, people that don't like the Counting Crows kind of say, oh, Adam's kind of whiny in that album and stuff, and never, I, of course, love the singing. But starting off the "I wanted so badly," right? That either really hits you, right? That there's somebody other than me staring back at me. That's either going to hit you and be like, "Wow, this is powerful," or like, "Oh, what's he whining about? He's a rock star." I love it. I love it. And I mean, the only line on the whole album that kind of makes me laugh, and he actually does kind of a fake laugh in it, right? Is that, and I walk on water every chance I get. And he said, like, I walk on water, and then he's like, ha, every chance I get, or something. So yeah, so thanks, Chris. That's how I feel about it.
also, I will say a good concert opener, when they've used that, they have occasionally used that as an opener, and I've actually always liked that as a like way into the show. Actually, I will say, as we'll maybe talk more about this, I like a lot of these songs as intro songs to the show. I think a lot of them, for whatever reason, work really well in that space. But I think Time and Time Again is one of the good ones for that.
Yeah, I would like to see it. And I wish, I'm going to check that. This is another song I don't think I ever saw. My 15 shows or whatever, or 20 shows. I don't think I ever saw it live at all. I'd have to check that. Okay, so moving to number 8, getting closer. Here we go. Now, this is the first one actually, it wasn't all over the place. 2 people had it quite low, and 2 people had it in the middle. So that's how it ends up at number 8, which is Perfect Blue Buildings. Let's start with Dan.
Yeah, that's funny because I had that at my number 10. It's a good song, but it just wasn't in that that top list for me.
Jeremy, any thoughts on Perfect Blue Buildings? You had it quite high. This is the first time the list has been off of your different than your list.
Yeah, I was number 5 on this one, and I think kind of the opposite of how it was with Time and Time Again. The younger version of me would have really not been into this song, but the more, I guess, life experience I've gotten and the more things I've been through, it's kind of climbed up the list. And it just, to me, it speaks to depression and longing and almost a little bit of self-loathing, which doesn't make for the happiest theme for a song, but I do think it brings a lot of meaning. Kind of gives you a picture into some of the things that Adam was going through when he wrote this song. Like, I can't keep myself away from me. You're your own worst enemy sometimes, and that's kind of where this song lands with me. So I like it. It's not upbeat. It's not something you want to sing along to in the car all the time. But when you're sitting around listening to music by yourself, it just kind of resonates with me.
All right, great point, Chris. What about you?
Yeah, I had this. I'm with you, Jeremy. I had this at number 4, and I'm with you on sort of the way, I don't know, the song makes you feel, and if you if you connect to this song, I think it's a really sort of beautiful expression of that feeling of, again, being kind of self-defeating in some ways, and really kind of questioning, yourself in that regard. I think there was a time, pretty sure it's this one. There's an early bootleg where Adam says this is his favorite song on the record. Now I'm sure that's changed a few times since August of 1993, but was one of Adam's favorites sort of at the beginning. I think I'm also a little influenced here by sort of how good the song is live, how beautiful the Sometimes It Snows in April into what became Miller's Angels outro is. I remember when they started going back to that, and I want to say it was 2007, they started doing that again after it, certainly not having played the song very much. It is, by the way, just above Ghost Train, and time again is just above Perfect Blue Buildings in terms of live plays. But when they went back to that, I lost my mind when they went into the outro. I was like, oh shoot, he's doing it. But again, kind of a weird thing to sing along to, but screaming, about how you haven't gone outside in a day. But it's that's I think part of what I love about that song. I've always imagined it. I think it'd be interesting to really hear that stripped down acoustic, which they have not done very much. But I think there's something really plaintive and beautiful that you can find there.
Yeah, he did. I know he's talked about this in concert, like you said. Did he also say once that it was like the hardest to record or to get right? There was something like it was the last one they record, or
I think that's Omaha. Actually, I think Omaha they played. I think is the one they played a million times. Is the story that they like just could not get right. And if you hear the demo, it's one of the few. Like the Omaha demo and the final version are different songs,
right? Yeah, or it might have been the writing of this was the difficult. But there's something I think even in Town Hall he actually intros it a little by saying some kind of difficulty or some kind of special, or as you said, that he definitely liked it. Quite a bit from that first group. Okay, great. Yeah, I had it. I have to admit, I had it. I was the only one, I guess. I had it ranked lowest, Perfect Blue Building. So yeah, that was my number 11. It was number 11 for me. So yeah, I do like Perfect Blue Buildings, and yeah, it's a great song, but just compared to everything else, it's always been a little lower. Okay.
Maybe you're just less sad than the rest of us.
Oh yeah, well wait till you hear. Oh wait, yeah. Well, once we get to number 20, you'll be sending me flowers and making sure I cannot touch booze or something. I don't know. So let's go into number 7. Yeah, here we go. This one, okay. A couple people had it in the middle. One person had it relatively low, and then one person had it relatively high, which is "Raining in Baltimore." Let's start with Dan.
Yeah, this was my number 9. It's a great moody song, right? And for me, I can imagine the location when he's sort of talking about the lyrics and stuff, but it just wasn't one of the killer ones.
Jeremy, what about yourself?
Yeah, I had this one at number 8 personally, and this was really the part of the list where it started to get difficult for me. I think kind of the middle section where they could have gone anywhere, but I really had to listen to them again and just try to get my thoughts straight on them. And I think this one I can relate to a little bit because I've moved around a lot in my life, and there are those times when you're just sitting there thinking about, where you came from and the people you miss and the things you miss. And, to me, when I hear him say repeatedly, I need a raincoat, I look at that as you need something to shield yourself from some of the painful memories that you had, but then you also need the phone call to bring you back to some of the good memories. And it just, I really like the song. I think it's one of their better ones on the album, even though I had it ranked all the way down there at number 8. But yeah, see, I'm already questioning my ranking as we're talking about.
Stay tuned next week. We'll re-rank everything.
I'm gonna stay where I'm at.
Chris, what about you, Chris?
So again, I think I'm the high vote here. I had this at number 3. This is, and again, part of this is I love the song in a lot of different ways, right? I think the piano version that is on the record is incredible. I think Adam is an underrated piano player. He's not a technically amazing piano player, but there's a bit. I always think if there's a Jenny Lewis comment from someone, but like, we'll get someone better to play the piano in this. Like, no, like you have to do it. You have to feel it, because you feel this out. And I think when you hear him play piano in this, it's like you hear him sort of getting that aspect of it, like the lyrics going with his playing. I think is part of why. And just the connection, that feeling of disconnection and that need for, I don't know, that like, I need a raincoat, right? All I want is something to cover me and something to keep me warm. I love it in the middle of Rain King. I think the two songs fit together so beautifully. I actually, and I like it in the middle around here too. They've done it around here. I like it. I look a better in Rain King, but I like it around here.
Have you ever heard it played the piano album version? See, I
Yes,
don't think I have. Okay.
2008.
Okay.
Bowery Ballroom.
Ballroom, right? Which I was
Pretty sure that's
overseas.
the only one, because they played it in '97 a bunch, and there's some
Okay.
good video from some of those versions where it's actually beautifully lit. It's Adam at the piano and like Charlie's playing accordion, and they have like kind of a beautifully like kind of very soft lighting on it with like a lamppost kind of
Hmm.
thing, and it's really really cool. If you look up the one, I think it's like Devore, California, which I know I have up on YouTube.
Which that's near me, by the way. Yeah.
Oh,
So which I didn't know. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So that's yeah. That's a great concert. I forgot that they played that in that one.
yeah, that's and so it works real well that way as well. I've always loved the story actually behind this one, right? Which is that he wrote this intending to give it to, I think it's Bonnie Raitt, and
Oh.
T-Bone Burnett heard him like working on this in the recording studio and like recorded, and he's like, "What's that? You haven't played this?" "Oh, I'm gonna give that's for like Bonnie Raitt." And he's like, "Hell, you are. That's going on the record."
Yeah.
And T-Bone, and it's interesting because T-Bone Burnett, he probably could have gotten it to Bonnie Raitt if he wanted to, but he was like, no, you should keep this one. The only other thing I'll say about this one, personal memory, I have find this song very comforting. And when I was a college debater, so I was sitting at George Washington University before one of the biggest rounds I was ever going to have. I was working on something, what we were going to do, and there's like, we're in this like student center, right? And so over off to the side there's a piano, and there's a kid just kind of tapping out Raining in Baltimore on piano, and my partner's like, "Oh, I can't hear anything," and I'm like, no, this is a good sign. This is a very very good sign. It's gonna be okay. I know we feel like real nervous right now, but this song's playing. It's gonna be good. And so, and we went and won that round. So I've always had a sort of a personal sort of appreciation for it. It's actually weirdly, the other weird thing about the song, it is in karaoke books. So if you want to go to karaoke and really just crush the energy of the room, like if
Right.
someone's
Right.
just saying like "Don't
ABBA
Stop
or something.
Believing" and everyone's up
Exactly.
high, you can just walk up and just start singing "Raining in Baltimore" just to really crush the energy. That is an option in many karaoke books in this country. Just FYI.
That's fantastic. Although that's why I love having different opinions, because I would say this is the one song. What did you call it? Comforting.
Comforting,
That
yeah.
Yeah, I find about 7 songs on here comforting. That would not be one I find comforting at all. And in fact, one of the reasons I ranked it where it did, I was like, oh, that was the first Counting Crows song. That wasn't on the first listen. Maybe a year into it, that made me cry. So thank you, and I still so
Yeah, but
Raining in
I think
Baltimore made me
I
fall.
think comforting in that, in a good way, but like making
Yeah,
you
I know,
cry in
I
a
know.
no.
Yeah,
Well, what made you
I guess
cry about it?
I don't know, but I will say that although I was laughing today because in the social media world he might have to change it, but I know the "I need a phone call" line. It gives me the feels, if you were. Now it might be "I need a text message," or it might be "I need a phone call" because everybody only does text
Mm-hmm.
messages. So maybe you need a real phone call.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just love the piano. You know, it's funny. I guess I knew that there were. Yeah, definitely one of my first favorite songs that someone is just on the piano and kind of saw, and I was kind of blown away. I had it, although not one of my top five. I had it. There we go. I had number 7, so about in the middle. But yeah, I love Raining in Baltimore. Maybe it's lost a little luster to me, and I'd love to see it live.
Also
Okay.
interesting, I'd say,
Oh, yeah.
relative to Omaha, in songs that work in sort of odd ways, right? I remember talking to someone about this song, and Adam hits the line. It's like, I can always hear a freight train if I listen real hard. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's so good. And someone's like, why? Why is that good? And I'm like, I don't know, but it is. Like, it's the exact right thing to say. But yeah, it's not like a lot of it lyrically is not clear why it works, but it evokes, to put Jeremy's point, right? It evokes something that is so like it's a picture. I don't know. It's a, yeah.
No, that's right. All right, we're gonna keep going. We're moving along, so I'm gonna keep going with the list. We are now at number 6, so right in the middle, and most of us had this in the middle, but one person had it a little lower, and that would be number 6, the capper, if you will, "Murder of One." Let's start with Dan.
Yeah, this is number 4 for me. It's higher. I just love this song, especially live. You know, for me, it's a great way to kind of close out the album. And I think I'm right in saying there was a lot of pressure on the band for this to be the first single, and it didn't become the first single. But yeah, just a super cool song.
And you've seen it live a number of times. I know they
Yeah,
haven't played it too much recently.
yeah, just fond memories of seeing it live.
Oh, that's fantastic. Jeremy, what about you?
Yeah, so I had this one at number 7, and this was another tough one because I really do love the song, and this is one I'll rock out to in the car and sing along. One thing I really love about this one is the wordplay on the title, right? So
Hmm.
obviously, a murder is the term for a group of crows. So he's talking about being a murder of one, so solo. But also, the song to me is speaking about maybe living your life for the wrong reasons and for the wrong people. And all these things that we think are so important in the moment, they kind of turn out to be meaningless at the end of the day. And you waste your life on these wrong things, and then you end up alone. So you're a murder of one because you're alone, but you also end up, murdering who you could have been.
Hmm.
So I kind of like that, kind of the dual meanings of the title of the song to me. And I don't know if I'm the only one that feels that way, but that's okay.
No, absolutely. Chris,
No, and so I'm a low vote on this. I had it number 9, although I also again love this, one of those classic. Like I love this song. It just didn't seem to hit above certain other things. Part of it, I was trying to think about how much I should let the live versions of the songs influence my rankings. It's hard
I
not
was
to let
having
it.
the same issue. Yep.
Yeah,
Both live, like the CDs, right? Like you might like the Heineken Hump, and then live that you've seen live. So you have both of those things.
right, and I think that it's hard because I love this song live. It's so incredible, and the energy that it brings, and but part of it is sometimes the different versions. And I was listening to the just the deluxe edition this week, and it's like, well, it's incredible. I mean, it's a 15-minute that version from Paris. It's like a 15-minute version of the song, and it's so far beyond what the original is, right? And it's like, am I sort of ranking the Sordid Humor song Doris Day too? Like, I don't know. So that's where this
All
kind of
right.
dropped. Like the song, sort of on its own, sort of fell down a little bit the list as I was looking at it. But the song, as like part of the catalog, and certainly as part of the live catalog, is incredible. So I no disrespect there. I just didn't get all the way up there. But I'm with you.
And Dan, I'm with you. I also had it number 4. And out of the top 6 songs for me, I almost didn't know what to comment about it, except that I just think it's a great song. And I know for a fact, I think I've only seen it live maybe two or three times. I know I loved it, but I know for a fact, Chris, to answer your question, that the live from a 10 spot version did affect my vote, and that moved. I mean, I don't want it to, but I know it did. And when he mentions, I mean, I do think too, one thing that cracks me up about this song is I don't know how he gets away with, and it's so natural, of naming your own band in the song in a first album, and somehow it does not come across as too excessive or egotistical or anything. That is amazing to me. Do you have any comments about them mentioning Counting Crows in one of their songs?
Yeah, you're right. It's an incredible bit. Like it's incredible that he kind of pulls that off. I always like live that, like when in that outro about I've been to Paris, I've been to Rome, I've gone to
Yep.
London, that you can kind of get like Adam's like vibe of the time about whether he screams I am all alone or I am not
Yes.
alone.
Yes. Exactly. I was thinking the exact same thing, and that's one of the reasons. Yeah, and I forget what he said the one or two times I saw it live, but well, wow, we're entering or 45-minute mark. I say we keep going. Now we're getting into right in this album, and let me take a brief moment of saying that that we're basically at the 30-year anniversary of this album, right? That it was September 14th, 1993. And as far as I could see, Mr. Jones. So I wasn't right nowadays, right? The singles are sometimes released before the album, right? In this case, the album was released, and it looks like the single came out a couple months later, December 1st. So and right, has sold millions and millions of copies. So all right, here we go. The top 5 Cat and Chris song, the official podcast ranking. number 5. And this one was basically, I guess, bifurcated, if you will. 2 people had it very high, and 2 people had it surprisingly low, which would be their big hit, Round Here. So let's start off with Dan.
Yeah, for me, this is the song of the album. It's a song that introduced me to the band. In my head, this is Duretz's Thunder Road. This is the song. It's the one that when I hear it live, hairs on the back of the neck. It's that's my number 1.
Jeremy, what about yourself?
So this one was up there at number 3 for me, and I have to agree with Dan about just the chills you get when you hear those first notes. This is one that I've heard open up the concert several times, and just his vocals on it, the instrumentation of it, I just love it. And then I heard an explanation on an interview with Adam for kind of what the song means to him, and he was talking about how all these things you're told as a child, are so important. And if you do all these things, life is going to be great. And you're just going to be this, responsible adult and things are going to work out for you. And this song is really just kind of saying, that's a bunch of BS. That's not how it works out at all. So, maybe don't worry so much about these arbitrary little things and, go ahead and stay up late and, do all these things you want to as a kid and enjoy your life and don't be held back.
Chris, what about you? Round Here, their big hit.
Again, I have this song lower than others at number 7. Again, kind of much like Murder of One, a struggle of like the song itself versus obviously it is one of they're great live vehicles. It has taken them a million amazing places as a live song.
Mm.
It is hard to. There's only one other song that I think reaches that heights, and we're still haven't talked about it on this record yet, so we'll get there. And at the same time, again, some of these specific songs individually kind of hit me, and maybe part of it is having heard it more times live versus not. Some of these songs, something like A Perfect Blue Building, stays a little more special in certain ways. Maybe that's why it sort of landed a little low this time as I was going through it. But of course, it is still maybe the only song on the record. I remember someone finding an essay on the internet a long time ago, pages and pages about whether the song, whether Adam is Maria or is it a person named Maria? I don't know who, like, and you could write pages like textually connecting this song to other things. And it's a fascinating song. Yeah, but so still amazing. I will also say one of the best, my other favorite bands, Gaslight Anthem, swipes a line from this song. In High Lonesome, Maria came from Nashville with a suitcase in her hand. I always kind of sort of wished I looked like Elvis is their swipe of and rewrite of that. I also, speaking of karaoke, again, if you ever want to really freak people out, you can do this song in karaoke, and you obviously can't do an alt in the middle of it. Can't really do that. But you can sing an outro like he does and sing alt and just really, it really starts to stun people when you start singing words that are not on the screen and do not, at least in their minds, connect to the actual song. But it's fun. I used to be able to just it's been a long time, and you kind of got to get in the right mindset of how to drop things on top of it. It's actually kind of interesting, like how he does it. But I used to be able to put all sorts of things on top of this song, and it's just such still, again, incredible song. Like, again, that I had this low is, I think, a tribute to how just fucking incredible this record is.
Dan, I need to thank you for putting it high because it balanced. Because I had it the second lowest, and I knew that
feeling bad.
And I'm glad then that we didn't do my original idea of the ranking, one by one, because I would have lost a lot of subscribers by saying Round Here was my number 10. So, and I was like, we have to have some people that love it to counter me. And I guess it's just, you know what it is? I always like this, and I do appreciate that, according to Adam, if it wasn't for Round Here on Saturday Night Live, Counting Crows, probably wouldn't exist today. Certainly not how we know them. Yeah, I guess, Dan, somehow I agree with what you say. And I've actually, I think this will be higher in a couple of years for me. I've gotten this reappreciation, especially after seeing them live 3 times last year. And I don't know, something just hit me. But it used to be like a song that I liked a lot, but I could, if they didn't play it in concert, I was like, yeah, no problem. And I have other things I want to see, and it's too long. I guess for some reason, something like what you said, Jeremy, in the beginning, even though I think his lyrics are brilliant, they didn't hit me, I guess, in my personal life as much. Kind of like what you said about some of the other songs, a little lower on your list, and that may be why I didn't have it as high. It might have been, some narcissism on something on my part that I thought it was a great song, but and a little, and it maybe, as I said in concert, maybe a little long or whatever. But anyway, I love Round Here, and it's definitely moving up. And now I love when they play it live. So. Okay, great. So now we are in the final four. August and Everything After's final four. I think already some surprises. The fact that Round Here was down at number 5. So let's go to number 4. And this is one that two people had it in the middle-ish. One person had it pretty high and one person had it very high, which would be their first big hit, Mr. Jones. Dan, start us off.
So this was my number 2. It's I find half my life when I'm talking about the Crows, I have to explain to people who don't know the Crows that this isn't just Counting Crows. Oh, they had this Mr. Jones song. I remember it from the 90s. And I'm like, but there's so much more than that. So I kind of find myself having to explain. Great song. I've even tracked down and been to the New Amsterdam. So there's a bar in San Francisco that's changed names. There is a little tribute on the wall to them. I think it's called the International Bar now, and it's in the Mission area. So if you get to go to San Francisco, I'd recommend you do it. But yeah, this was my number 2.
Thank you for that trivia. That was one I never looked into. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can still go to that bar.
Oh, that's awesome. What about you, Jeremy? Where did you have Mr. Jones?
I reluctantly had Mr. Jones at number 6, and I love the song, absolutely love it, and I think this is just kind of a testament to how great this album is. That I can look at their biggest single ever, in 30 plus years, and or close to 30 years, and say this is my 6th favorite song on this album, not in their entire catalog. And I think there's just something so relatable to it. Who hasn't been sitting at a bar before with their friends, and you look across and here's this, super good looking guy, and he's surrounded by girls, and you're like, I want to be that guy.
Or not so good looking guy that's surrounded
right, yeah,
by girls.
but you want to be that guy regardless, right?
Yeah, of course.
And I think it kind of speaks to a tendency we have. I know I personally have it, and I think a lot of people in our society do as well, where you just have a hard time accepting good enough, right? You always want more. You always want to increase your status. And sometimes you need to just be happy with what you've got, because even when you do achieve these things, you're going to find something else that you feel like you need to achieve to make yourself happy. And, as the song tells you, it's not always going to happen. You can keep reaching for the stars, but eventually, maybe you get too close to the sun.
That's right. Chris, what are your thoughts on Mr. Jones?
Well, so I had it number 8 again, so lower, a little bit lower. Although again, it's a classic song. Another one where I kind of struggled with the album version versus. I mean, I think the Across the Wire version is one of the greatest moments they have committed to tape. I think that 5 minutes there is spectacular, and in a lot of ways, I think that is what turned me into like a Counting Crows super fan. Is that 5 minutes of them taking this song that I'd heard a million times at that point, just nothing in the background. Oh, well, yeah, Mr. Jones. Yeah, okay. And then them doing it that way, and you go, oh, that is what the song is about. That is how, okay. And I, in some ways, think it's fascinating because I think the song is better because they succeeded, right? So it's a song written from the perspective of someone who wants to be a rock and roll star. And we were talking, Eric, right before about that Bobby Bones interview, and he kind of explains the story, right? I mean, he's in a bar. It's kind of literally, it's like, Marty Jones is my friend. Mr. Jones is my friend Marty. His father's a flamenco player. It's like, it's pretty direct when you think about it, but he's like seeing this and going like, man, my life would be so much better if I could just be this star that I want to be, knowing, of course, that it's not perfectly true, but then he achieves it, and it's like, it is kind of awesome, but also kind of terrible. And it's so, the song is, I feel like, kind of flipped in meaning so many times for him that I think that's part of the interesting journey, of the song. And a lot of interesting, great, like part of the interesting thing about the song live is that it's got so many different, like you've got the sort of the original version, you've got the acoustic version, this Desert Life, they're playing it sort of in the middle, and they've kind of returned to the acoustic thing a few times, but done it kind of differently than the first one. So it's an amazing song. And again, I'm like, I kind of can't believe I had it so low retrospectively, but also again, there's so many other things. And again, I think sometimes the things that are the bigger things maybe feel a little bit less special sometimes than the things that are, a little bit, a little bit more personal, because they're not, you don't yell them with everyone at each show,
Exactly. Yeah. And for those that might criticize my putting around here as number 10 and that I want to be an iconoclast or something like that, but I had Mr. Jones as my number one and very upset it didn't make the top three. And it's funny because, yeah, usually I think quote unquote super fans of bands, they like to be defensive and say, well, that single, and yeah, it's a great single, but that's not their best song. And if you bought the whole album, you'd realize that was just a single. I think Mr. Jones, from that Van Morrison-esque type of sha na na into the, yeah, I just and I don't, I'm not saying I play it all the time and it's that, but I don't get sick of it. I just think it's amazing, unique, and so Counting Crows. And as you said, Chris, I mean, they have two meta things on their album. One of them being mentioning Counting Crows on track number 11, "Murder of One," and then they have this meta of like their first single is about wanting to be a rock and roll star. It made them into a mega rock and roll star. And I looked it up. They sold 7 million albums in the U.S. and at least another million overseas, and became wildly popular, and even to this day. So that's unbelievable to me. It's funny you mentioned about this is the only Counting. I don't love this. Despite living in Japan a couple of years, I don't love karaoke. I love my speaking voice, which is why I was in radio, but I do not love my singing voice. But I did Mr. Jones once, and there's a guy that did not know me. He was kind of a jerky coworker, actually, American guy. But he looked over at me and he's like, that song is so you. Like he knew me, but he didn't know I like Counting Crows, and he just thought I liked the song or the lyrics, but it said remind me. But that actually, the reason I say that too is there was another. I was on a road trip once when I can tell you, I was 20, either 6 or 27, and somebody had a mix. I guess it was a mix CD, right? When you're burning CDs, he had a mix CD, and Mr. Jones was on, and this guy was a pretty good friend of mine, just getting to know me pretty well. And I was loving. I was kind of falling asleep in the back seat, but loving that I heard Mr. Jones. And he looks in the back and he's like, Eric, for some reason, this song makes me think of you. And then I was like, did you know I was like a obsessed Counting Crows fan? And so there's something about the lyrics that just really, like you said about Jeremy, I don't know, everything about being aspirational to, wanting the pretty girl on the other side of the bar to the drinking. And I just think the song is just uniquely great too as a song, even if the lyrics didn't hit me the way it did. So there's a reason it was their first big hit.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just point out an interesting thing here. So, Jeremy talked about, Dan at the top talked about Oasis, right? On that list of things. Yes. And it's interesting. I'd never made love both bands, love Oasis, never made, and obviously love Counting Crows, never made the connection before, right? Mr. Jones, right? You want to be a rock and roll star. One of the first songs on the first Oasis record is called Rock and Roll Star. And in that song, which was written far before they were rock and roll stars, Liam sings, "Tonight I'm a rock and roll star." And it's the interesting sort of dichotomy and part of, if you were trying to sort of describe the difference, the similarities and the differences in those two bands, right? It's Adam says, "I want to be a rock and roll star," right? And Oasis just said, "We're rock and roll stars." It's like, are you famous yet? Like, we are rock and roll stars. We get difference is probably just the amount of cocaine the two of them were consuming, the relative differences. But it's just interesting thought about that. The other thing I'll point out, which we'll talk about lots, I'm sure, when we talk about like the bootlegs, but one of my favorite lyric switches is "I want to be Alex Chilton," because I don't really want to be Bob Dylan, but I kind of wished I was Alex Chilton a few times in my life. So.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, it's fun. Jeremy, when you were talking about in one of the other songs, I can't remember, and then we'll get to Dan, that about explaining the luckily we don't hear as much nowadays about people saying, well, what's Mr. Jones and who's Mr. Jones and is he talking about his private area. I did actually have a coworker that said that to me, and he and it's funny because people said that like fratty guy, this guy was definitely a fratty guy, and I loved him, but he said yeah, it's a great song because somehow he heard I was a Chris fan. He's like, but it's about this. I'm like, no, it's not. Oh yeah, no, it's not. I can help you do some research. I did want to say about Mr. Jones that we're going to go to Dan is that a little piece of random trivia. Of course, Mr. Jones, we all know as Crows fans, is based upon a real person, Marty Jones. Now, Marty Jones did not co-write Mr. Jones, but he did co-write another song on this album, which we'll get to in a bit. We actually didn't mention it yet. Dan, you had a comment?
Yeah, I could be wrong here, but my first gig was 97, and it was at the Royal Albert Hall. And they played a cover of So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star, which I think was an Oasis cover. I could be wrong, but yeah, that was at my first gig. So that would have been Recovering Satellites tour.
Oh, wow.
It's the Bird song.
Okay.
So you want to be a rock and roll star, listen now to what I say, just get an electric guitar, take some time and learn how to play, which of
Got
course
it. So it's yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, great.
They should cover some Oasis. I think they did some in the Shim Sham. They did a couple of the Oasis songs somewhere.
Oh, yeah, I think you're right. I forget now, but I did listen to those once each. I didn't listen to them a lot, but all right, here we get the count. Now we're getting to the top three official ranking, of course. Here, top three Counting Crow song, and somehow we already went through their top two singles, which would be Mr. Jones and Round Here. So here we go, number 3, and this was a song that 2 people had very high and 2 people had moderately high, I guess, which would be Anna Begins. Dan, start us off.
Yeah, this was middle for me. This was number 7. But I just love the lyrics in this one. You know, he's kind of talking about being in love and, just the lyrics are just fantastic. I'm going to want to quote the lyric, but I'm not going to get it perfect. So I'll come back. I'll go check it and come back. But yeah, the lyrics.
Thank you, Jeremy. Anna Begins.
Yeah, this one probably surprisingly is number 1 for me. And I feel like it's the most relatable song for me on the album. And that probably just pegs me as a messed up person. But, it's just the song is kind of a mess. There's the chorus doesn't really break in until the very end of the song. The lyrical patterns they're just kind of all over the place. But I just love the way it speaks to me. And the way I've always interpreted it, and the reason I can relate to it so well, not to get too personal, but I just feel like in the beginning when he's saying, I'm not ready for this sort of thing. It's early in a relationship, and he's putting himself out there and all of his flaws and everything, and he's saying, I'm not ready for this, to be a part of this person's life and be the support that they need. And then as time goes by, this person realizes that, hey, they were right. They weren't ready for it. And now when, at the end, when he's going into the final chorus, he's saying he's not ready to lose this person. And I think everybody can relate throughout their lives. There might have been a person that was special to you and you pushed them away. And by the time you realized it was too late, and now they're gone. And, it brings me back to a lot of feelings that, maybe were not such good feelings, but it's in a comforting way.
Chris, what about yourself?
Yeah, I'm with you. It's such a beautiful, and the odd pacing of it is so beautiful too.
Oh, that's true.
It's another kind of a classic. I think a little bit like Time and Time Again that way, right? Where it's like the pacing of it is not traditional. Like it's not
right.
If you're like if you were to try to like sit down and break down the structure of it, it's sort of ABAB, but it's not. And yeah, it's like one of those songs. If you've ever had those complicated feelings about someone, such a like sort of beautiful and perfect expression of it. I had it down. It's again number 6, but that was hard. This was hard. Yeah. This was in the middle where I was like, oh, all these songs are real great in the middle here.
But what you were saying, Chris, before about the time of life and stuff, I think this was written about, if I remember correctly, an Australian woman when he was backpacking, when he was 24 or 22 or something. So, but that ties into exactly what both Jeremy said and what you said about the kind of the coming of age as like post-college coming of age, right? Like that you're trying to,
yeah, they're trying to figure out like, is this like again this relationship, is it meaningful? But what does that mean? And what is Am I ready for something that's big and important? And we all had kind of I'm sure we
Yeah,
all
it
had
could
a little
last
bit of this
multiple
experience.
years, right? And this kind
Sure.
of and to commit, right? That's what I think. Some of it's about committing, where you kind of know if you have a relationship in high school and college. Sometimes you kind of know it's not going to last or be your wife or husband or whatever.
Mhm.
So, okay, sorry. Any other thoughts,
I will
Chris?
also add
Anna
just
Begins?
another great opener. They've done, it's not a common opener, but when they've opened with this, I actually think this is an amazing way to start a show, to sort of break into this, the way it comes in, the way the band kind of slowly comes in. I like, one of the things they do that's not, I think, a traditional thing as a live act is sort of the slow opener, right? That, like, we're not coming out and like hitting you full force. We're kind of coming out and letting this sort of
Yep.
breathe and open up. And this song, I think, does that very, very well. When they,
Yeah,
again, it's been a long time, but they've
they
done
either played this as number one or two when I saw them last, and I know on the last tour they also started a bunch of songs, or a bunch of, yeah, what you said. I think Speedway they started a couple, right, to try to do that untraditional. Yeah, no, Mr. Jones might be my favorite song from the album, and I think it always maybe was, but Anna Begins might have been the one I was obsessed with the most because of everything you said. It was the lyrics, it was the non-traditional, it was this kind of, right, maybe thinking about my love life at the time and this kind of thing. Let's just say it's not the only reason, but I loved it so much I might have named one of my kids in part because of this song. So that if that's not a testimony to the power of either Adam's lyrics or my, strange obsession with this band, I don't know what is. And I have to say, I love both. This is the one song that some people get upset that basically the version they played in the last, maybe 15 years
Mhm.
is a different version than the one on the album. And I love both. I know this is the one song that gets some people riled up that, oh, I don't, especially if they're people that love the album but aren't huge Counting Crows heads, right? They did love that album, but maybe didn't buy an album after that. This is the one song that kind of gets under them. But I think the kind of harder version, I guess, it's the more electric version, I think is also fantastic. And I understand why Adam loves that version.
Yeah, live, and this gets kind of the complaint of like, why isn't he actually singing it? Because he kind of like
Right, this is the
speaks it a
one
little bit
song.
more,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I almost get mad that people say, "Oh, he speaks all his lyrics." I'm like, no, but there are some songs he tends to do it more, which is this one.
Mhm.
But I said, if you watch him in his other songs, he is singing. But this is just how he feels. Yeah.
And I did check it, by the way. Were you at the O2 show in Dublin? Was that the one?
Yes.
They opened with that. I am
Yeah, they
jealous. It's been
did.
a long time since I've seen them open with it. Now I'm a little bit jealous of you, Eric, that you
But
got
that
to
was
see that
part. But
recently.
that was part of my friend though, because I joke because he hadn't seen him in a while, and as I said, he doesn't understand my obsession as much anymore. But that was what he kind of said, like, here's 6 songs I want to hear. They played 5 of those, and some of those were not regular songs, like Anna Begins. And I was like, did you get your list to him ahead of time or something? Dan, did you want to say something about the lyrics? Did you?
Yeah, I didn't want to get them wrong. So you try to tell yourself the things you try to tell yourself to make yourself forget.
Yes,
To make yourself forget. The lyrics are genius on this one.
that's true.
It's
That's
Adam at his best.
Yep. No, when you were reading them, I was like, this is genius.
You know, it's
Yeah.
funny.
Thank you.
I have those lyrics framed hanging on my wall about 5 feet away from me.
Wow.
And is that something that were you able to get a print or something with those, or is
Yeah.
that
Yep.
yeah. Funny, that was the one song I kind of thought about doing that too, but I have not yet, but I might. So we're down to the last two. So Crows fans listening know what the last two are, but maybe you don't know their order. And so let's go right into number two. And I got to say that, anyway, I'll say that when we get to number one. So number two, I've got to say, I don't think there's any doubt that this, except for maybe having Omaha number 10, I think the biggest surprise has to be that number two is Sullivan Street. And I'm guessing it's not just because you loved episode 1 of our podcast. So, Dan, you didn't have it as high, but you still had it pretty high. When I'm talking about Sullivan Street, maybe you're surprised that it is ranked number 2.
Yeah, it is a surprise, actually. It was number 6 for me. This goes back to the opening of the concert, right? For me, many of them I've been to, it's been Sullivan Street that's been the opener. And it just, for me, it just sets up the concert really well. I know I'm going to have a really good, few hours. It was my 6, but super cool song.
Jeremy, you had it very high. You were one of the people that pushed it. They can blame you, Jeremy, if it's too high, but you had it number 2. So please talk about your love of Sullivan Street.
I did. So this song has kind of had 2 different meanings to me throughout my life. The first one, I spent quite a bit of time deployed in my military time, and this song always came to me before we would go out in a convoy, and you're kind of worried about what's going to happen. You're a little bit scared, and you're out on the road. And whenever I heard this song, um, it would always make me just think about taking the long way home, and you're going to get there eventually. It's just going to be a while, and there was always something comforting about it, right? And then later on, hearing Adam talk about it a little bit more, it kind of hit me in the same way Anna Begins does, where he talks about, no matter how good a relationship is, sometimes you just know it's going to be over. And I've been at that point several times in my life, and it really sinks in with me when I hear those lyrics from that song. And just I love being able to listen to their songs and think completely different things about them, and they all feel valid. And that's what's great about talking to you guys too, is there's so many different interpretations that we can pull from one song.
Fantastic. Chris, what
Yeah.
about you, and where did you rank Sullivan Street?
I had this number 2, so this lines up exactly where I had it. I'm with Jeremy. Like there's, I think, of the realizations you can have in life, that the idea that you are in a relationship and you are going to be the one to end this relationship is one of the more devastating ones you can have, especially when maybe the other person does not see that. And so the way he evokes that and talks about it, it's so beautiful. There are a couple live versions, but he really just kind of like tells the whole story, and it is heartbreaking. The other thing I would say about this is I think this is one of his best vocals. He is so, even and live, especially the earlier versions, like 94. Like, again, just going back to the deluxe edition today, just to kind of use that as a jumping off point for the live stuff. I mean, the way he sings this is so beautiful, and what he gets out of it. And I'd actually always forget about there's really beautiful backing vocals on the song. I think it's Maria McKee. And it's like, that's part of, I love this song. It's so beautiful and perfect. And it's one that sort of snuck up me. A friend of mine, one of my best friends from college, I remember him talking to me about how a girl that he really liked wrote these lyrics to him in their high school yearbook. And it didn't, again, until I was like, oh, that's sucks, man. And it wasn't until, again, I got further into the song and I was like, I think later I was like, "Oh, Frank, man, that is devastating." I don't think I realized that when you first told me how sad that was. I think I sort of knew, but now I really know how sad that one is. The one other thing I will say, of the songs that I really love, this has some of my favorite live versions, like the openers, to Dan's point, when they open with this, especially when they were doing I Belong Where You Belong, because I love that. And that's actually, it's interesting because you talk about the feelings that you have. When I started going to see shows with my wife, when I was like, we were kind of falling in love, they were doing that. And that feeling of, well, that lyric feels very appropriate in my heart right now. But there's a version they did in the mid-aughts about like, does she want to run? And the way it's like, it's weird. It's like sad, and so it sort of fits the lyrics, but it's the way they sang it. I think they got so much joy out of singing it together that, like, Adam's got this like huge smile on his face, just totally took me out of it. I'm like, I'm not begrudging you your happiness, man. I'm just telling you, this is a sad as shit song, and I want to feel a little sad while you're singing it, man. I want to feel quite so like you're just like loving how sad this is. I don't know.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, I had Sullivan Street at number 5, and this is definitely one that's moved up on my list.
You named the podcast after this,
I know.
Eric.
I know, that's so funny. That's another shocking move. I guess I thought more of Sullivan Street, right? It's a place that Cruz fans can hang out. And in fact, I do have a Sullivan Street memory because it's not a big street, but this is when I was a Cruz fan. This might have been, this would have been, I guess, like 98. I remember. And I kind of think it was raining, actually, so it reminded me of raining in Baltimore too. But I went on a first date right either on or right off Sullivan Street in the Village.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's not the Sullivan Street that he names it after, but there is a small little Sullivan Street in the Village. And I went to this and it was funny and I remember even afterwards that it was like a typical, I guess it's personal, but like where I convinced I guess you'd say a woman who was, she, I guess, was a coworker, but in a different like building even. But I guess you could argue she was kind of out of my league a bit. And when I convinced her at the party to go on a date with me, my friends were like, "You're the man." And then the first date was fine, but I left leaving. Okay, she wasn't not she was very neutral after the dinner and probably won't hear from her again, and I didn't for years. So but it kind of brought up about these insecurities too, right? And that's some of the stuff that Jeremy was talking about. And so had like, I could get this girl for a date, but I can't, like it just ends at that. And I'm in this never ending loop. I have more to say, but Jeremy, I do want to go to you right now.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, please.
Just to Chris's point about Adam's vocals on this song, and you were talking about karaoke earlier. I can attest that his vocals are great on this song, and mine are not.
That's funny.
It's a rock.
One thing I want to say about Sullivan Street, and I thought of this when I guess I named the podcast and was listening to it more. And as I said, it's definitely moved up. But do you know how like every band or maybe even every album, there's a song that there could be the single songs, there could be your favorite song, and then there are the songs that I guess it's the prototypical, is that the right word, right? Or the most like this, I think Sullivan Street is the most definitive Counting Crow song from this album and from this era, which is like the lyric, right? It's almost like, yeah, someone could like Mr. Jones and not like the album, but if I had them listen to Sullivan Street and they love Sullivan Street, then I think they'll probably like Counting Crows, August and Everything After. And I also love that it features my two favorite band members, I guess, which is just Dave's little, right? That Dave's has as the catchy guitar, and Charlie is featured actually quite heavily, which I didn't realize until the last couple of years how important the piano is. Go back and listen if you listen to it tonight or whatever. The piano is so good in the song, and I think wouldn't be as good otherwise. And his lyrics, I just think, it's a very August and Everything After song until, of course, the actual song August and Everything After got released. But so there you go, Sullivan Street. So before we get to number one, which of course people could have figured out, I'll just not just recap, but I also do want to say how close some of them were. So number 11 was Ghost Train, and that was a pretty clear 11, unfortunately, despite me trying to move it up the rankings a little bit. And then actually, I can see why some of you had trouble, because that was the one spot. Clearly, Omaha, time and time again, in Perfect Blue Buildings, and that was the 10th, 9th, and 8th, respectively. That was basically a three-way tie. There was only 1 point that separated them. Then you had a fairly small gap, but clear gap, which would be number 7, Raining in Baltimore, number 6, Murder of One, number 5, Round Here, number 4, Mr. Jones. They all had basically 3 points between them. But once you get to Mr. Jones, I will say Sullivan Street, Anna Begins, and Mr. Jones were all fairly tied, even though there was a point difference between them. But a clear number one, and in fact, it might have been, in the whole gap, the whole list, except for the gap between Omaha and Ghost Train, which I could get, this actually had the largest gap between number 2 and number 1. Number 1 being the ranking from Counting Crows. Dan, any thoughts about that being our number 1?
Yeah, lots of thoughts. I guess the first thing is, if I want to introduce a friend to the band, that's the song I tell them to go listen to before any other song, before Mr. Jones. Go listen to Ranking, and you'll get an idea about what the band's all about. It might not be, their greatest song, but you'll get an idea about the band. I love, again, when listening to it live, the fact in the middle they can go off, and I've heard everything from Oh Susanna, Lippy Kids, Thunder Road, so many different interpretations in the middle of it, and obviously on that Live at Town Hall album, you get Thunder Road, but it's such a good song. The only downside is that when you hear this song live, you're near the end of the concert. Apart from that, what a banger! What a banger!
That's great. Thanks so much, Dan. What about you, Jeremy? Where did you have Ranking?
I actually had this at number 4, which makes me feel like I was probably a little low compared to everyone else. But I love the song. This song just makes me happy. It's hard to hear this song and not smile. And I actually always tie it to one of my dumbest memories of early adulthood, I guess. I was 17 years old, and a friend of mine and I, Jason, he's my best friend since I was 5 years old, we got arrested for smashing mailboxes. This is what you do when you grow up in Illinois. right? You get bored and you go out and you destroy some mailboxes. So there's the line in there about Mr. Henderson, and I know, from reading up on it, it's about a character named Mr. Henderson from a book. But one of our arresting officers was Detective Henderson. So I always, for some stupid reason, I always equate this song with driving around in this cop car and pointing out the mailboxes and confirming, yes, we smashed that one. 'Cause- and then, aside from that, as Dan mentioned, some of the live versions I think are just incredible. The Thunder Road version for me, I'm a huge Springsteen fan as well. So hearing that is great, and I also had the opportunity to see them when Rob Thomas opened for them,
Mm.
and they actually brought Rob Thomas back out for the encore, and Adam
Mhm.
gave him the second and third verses of Rain King, and it was just awesome to hear his interpretation of it. And it was vastly different than the way Adam would have sang it, but it was great. Just, I don't know, just overall a great song. I love it.
Dan, before we get to Chris, Dan, another comment on Rain King, please.
Yeah, just on that, Rob Thomas, I've actually got a recording of that. So if anyone wants a copy, let me know.
Oh, great.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I didn't know about that, so thanks for that. Thanks for that tip, Chris. You please tell us where you put Rain King.
This is my number one song. This is my favorite Counting Crow song.
Well, in fact, you're the only one that had it as number one. It was like uniformly high, but that gives you some. That must make you feel good, Chris.
If I were to rank songs that exist in the world, this would be top 5 at worst for me. And probably at some days in my life, this has been absolutely my favorite song in the entire world, no doubt, nothing else. If you told me I could pick one song to go on a desert island with, as long as I get to keep the live versions too, it is Rain King, and it's actually not particularly close. Yeah, it's amazing. I think it's to Dan's point, it is the thesis statement, right, about the kinds of feelings that the band evokes, and the kinds of feelings about who you are and what you're looking for in the world. It's a sad song, but it is ultimately sort of like hopeful and affirming, right? They're
Yes.
looking for something, and a belief that we talk in some of these songs about kind of, oh man, woe is me. Like Perfect Blue Buildings is like, I got to protect myself from myself, and I'm, and Rain King is, I deserve this. I actually, it's a self-care. It's a song of love. Although, of course, the fact that you are the Rain King is suggestive that perhaps you are not a perfect person, and that there's some sad pieces to that within you. Obviously, the live versions help. They are some of the great, I think, performances, and I could talk. We could probably do at some point. We'll probably do a whole podcast about live versions of Rain King. I think my favorite versions are those with of the ones they've done somewhat regularly would be the ones with the "Someone to Watch Over Me," the Gershwin song, which I always think is and again a really beautiful sort of representation. At some point, I had a T-shirt where I got those lyrics like printed on the back. It's yeah, I think that is it's so perfect, and I could talk for again, like I don't want us to be here for 3 hours.
It's not.
So I'm going to stop myself there. But that is the song.
But you said, Chris, this is why I hope we keep our podcast, because you either say things that I was thinking, or a unique perspective that I totally agree with. Like, yes, I was going to say that. But you did mention something that I was thinking about actually quite a bit recently,
Yeah.
which was that my favorite songs, and really, if you look at my top 5 here, I think Counting Crows are at their best when when Adam mixes the optimism with realism with pessimism, and it's all kind of intertwined. And you're right, Raining in Baltimore and maybe Perfect Blue Buildings and maybe even Time and Time. No, but look what I rent. Mr. Jones does that, right? And that mixed, and Rain King and Anna Begins, and I would argue with 4 and 5, Murder of One in Sullivan Street as well. Yeah, I agree with you too. This has also moved up with me. I probably would have had this 6, 8 years ago or 10 years ago, but now it's number 2. And Dan, it clearly in their shows, whether you like it or not as a Crows fan, this is clearly their showstopper in the concerts. There's no, I mean, around here, of course, when people say get very, very late, they get excited and they love to hear the intro of Mr. Jones. in some of those. But when you talk about that gets the largest applause and gets the people on their feet, it's always Rain King, at least in the last 5 to 10 years, right? Maybe I don't know if it was always that way, but it clearly is that way now.
I think
Chris.
it's always been kind of like one of those, because especially the way Adam presents that song, the
Yep.
hands up at the end, right? There's
Oh,
like
I
an
think that's the
iconic
best.
image to it. Yeah.
So did anybody hear recently? Adam said it might have been on that podcast or might have been on a different one. We were just talking with Bobby that he said he loves all his albums, but if he had one that he would re-record is August and Everything After, and partly you probably have a different version of Anna Begins and some, but he said it's a little shiny on certain things and there's certain things he would do different, but clearly the ending of that song is one he would change. Instead of his like, yeah, right, he would do Why Don't You Come, which I love, the Why Don't You Come Out From a Rain.
Right.
That is incredible.
Yeah, that moment is, yes, I'm with you. That is a perfect, yeah, that is, and that's, I will say the live aspect with that song, it's not just the like the alts and stuff like that. It's that they've played that song everywhere, from the most gentle possible way to play it to the heaviest possible way to play it. And they all work. You could speed that song up, you could slow it down, you could add a mandolin, you could take away the drums, you could, like, Rob Thomas could sing the middle. Like, it does not matter. It will all work. It's all going to be amazing. Actually, but my favorite thing about the Rob Thomas thing was somewhere he said he heard Rob Thomas sing it and he was like, what do you do? Like, how'd that melody come to you the way you're singing the middle? And he's like, well, I just sung it the way it is on the record. And I was like, I beat me. I had no clue that was how I sung it on the record. I hadn't thought about that in years. So he's sung it a million different ways and they all work. And it's just like, that to me is aspect of it too, that it's the most flexible song of theirs. It always, it's an opener, and I'm with you, Dan, they should go back to opening with it sometimes, because I hate that it's towards the end and like an indication of the end. I always think there are songs that lose. I think Hanging Around is obviously the song that's hurt the most by this, because it just always, like, they've always just played it at the end. So it's like a great song that always makes you go, well, I guess the end is here. Wah, wah. You know, like, and I don't want Rain King to become that, guys. Come on, Counting Crows. Let's bring it up in the set list somewhere.
Dan, what do you have to add on that?
I'm going to start a petition that the Crows open with Rain King. From now onwards. Adam, if you're listening, come on.
Every show.
Get the crowd going right away. You're right. That would be a big difference from starting with Speedway. I'll tell you that much. Certainly,
but not the slow versions. The slow versions are pretty slow way, but those are beautiful, and they could do it just alternate. Just do it acoustic one night, electric the next, and just
or do both in the same show. Right, start with the acoustic, and then with the I could do that with Rain King.
3 times. I love it. Don't worry about it. Just play Rain King 3 times in the set. I will be very happy with that. The other thing clearly the most important thing here.
The other thing I have to say about Rain King is that it's my joke that it's his. Okay, it is one of my favorite lines from him, but Adam has much more complicated, insightful, thoughtful lyrics. She's been dying and I've been drinking. I used to joke with people. I'm like, he should have won a Grammy immediately after that, right? that she's been. I mean, come on. Is there anything that like sums up like, I don't know, early 20s angst than she's been dying and I've been drinking? Great. Okay, so I do have some. There you go. I do have some housekeeping to do. I also wanted to mention that the Marty Jones thing, if I'm correct, he co-wrote Anna Begins.
I didn't know that. Actually, forgot that. Yeah,
he was one of the. I think there's a couple writers on there, like 5 maybe, and he was one of them. Yeah, there's some other things I could say, but I did want to give both, I think Jeremie and Dan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, had maybe a little story, since we haven't had you on before, about meeting either Adam or some of the other bandmates, just kind of a fun way to end this August show. Jeremie, we'll start with you.
Right, yeah. So I know you guys had mentioned in the first episode that, there might have been a couple concerts you went to that you'd had too much to drink prior to the concert. And this was one of those situations for me. This was, I want to say, back in 2014 in Tucson, Arizona. And it was at a Casino del Sol. And my friend and I were up there for the concert, and we're staying at the casino, and we had way too many drinks before getting ready to head downstairs. And we hit the button for the elevator, and the doors open up, and Adam's standing in the elevator. Right. And, we kind of touched on earlier how we think Adam feels about super fans. maybe not the best impression. So he probably feels the same way about drunk fans, and that was certainly me. So I get on the elevator, and the first question out of my mouth was, "Are you who I think you are?" And and his response was, "I don't know. Who do you think I am?" And I was like,
That's a very Adam. That is a very
Yeah.
Adam response too.
I said, "You're Adam."
Yeah.
And I was like, "This is so cool. We're going to your show." And he's like, "Yeah, so am I."
Oh, that's great.
And I did get my shit together long enough to ask him for a picture, and it's a horrible picture that reflects off this shiny elevator wall, but just a great moment. And I know he probably was not happy to see me that day, but he handled it well. And Adam, if you ever hear this, I apologize. I was a drunk guy.
But it means a lot to the super fan. I know I almost get annoyed sometimes that when kind of casual fans or someone that just goes to the show bothers, not that, oh, they got a photo and I didn't, but I always like, it's got to be so tiring to have all these people want to take selfies with you and everything. So I'd rather it just be the hardcore fans that it means so much to them when the other people put it on their Insta and then maybe forget about it a year later or something. Dan, did you have something to share about either meeting other band members or anything else?
Sure. And note to self, I want to go before Jeremie next time because I can't top that great story. So,
Okay.
Please. I thought I would just share a little bit about the meet and greets in the UK and how they did them. And unfortunately, I can't see them going back to doing them this way, but they were a great way of doing it. So, I went to the Hammersmith concert a few years ago, and when you turned up for the meet and greet, they handed you a poster and a pen. So you had a poster for that specific tour and a pen, and essentially there was probably about 20 people doing the meet and greet, and you got to go around to each band member and ask them to sign the poster. So not only were you getting their signature and maybe something dedicated to you, but also you were getting a little bit of time with each band member, and it was just a fantastic way of doing a meet and greet. And as I say, I can't see them ever going back to that, but what a great way of doing it.
That is fantastic. And you got was there a particular question, like maybe forget about, did you ask a particular question or get a particularly interesting comment to like a non-Adam band member at that meet and greet?
The only thing I remember is like not clicking with Jim. So, and this is me, big fan, again, alcohol and stuff, but just, trying to make conversation, and every answer was a very short answer. So maybe he wasn't on his game, or maybe he just didn't like the fact that Brits kept asking you lots of questions. But yeah.
Well, that's funny because at the meet and greet I was at, I kind of stood next to him, and he was the most friendly and jovial. I thought, well, this is his youthful, and he jokes now that he's not as young anymore, but he was always considered right, almost like the younger brother of. So maybe that was part of it. Okay, well, another great. Well, any other final thoughts about? I mean, the only thing I want to say, and this will, and then I'll go, Dan. We'll mention this at later. But when you talk about the feeling of the album, and certainly the band members have changed, and we'll talk about that at a further time. But I did kind of want to mention that my buddy Dave Bryson, not my buddy, wish he was, he co-wrote 7 out of the 11 songs. So he much more impactful, I guess, on the feeling, shape, and sound of this album compared to the others. And he actually did co-wrote 2 of the demo songs too, which we'll talk about in future episodes: "Love and Addiction" and "Shallow Days." Dan, you had a wrap-up comment?
I just had a thought around. So at number 11, we all voted Ghost Train. When the album was being created, obviously they wrote a song that then got updated called August and Everything After. So to maybe an action for the listeners to write in to see whether they would substitute Ghost Train for a copy of August and Everything After.
Oh, right. You're saying that if the album actually had that on the track list, right, which got omitted.
Would people be, do they think that the album would be different and in a good way?
That's interesting.
That's the song, and this is like be a bummer for me, but the song that they at least the story is, and what makes the most sense in the sense that they're the most similar, at least in the original versions, that like got kicked out or that kicked out August and Everything After is Raining in Baltimore.
That's what I would guess, yeah.
And so I don't know. I mean, if Ghost Train, I feel like it would really change the tone of the record if you had a second kind of like slower piano song. So I don't know if it would. I mean, I'd love that. I love the August and Everything After and the again, they've never released the original version, but the live versions that Adam did in 2003 that were like solo, that I assume are basically a pretty good version of what was on the record or would have been on the record.
Yeah, so you're yeah, I know what you're saying. So it'd be interesting, right, to sub the Ghost Train because the ranking had a number 11. But the other interesting thing that you're bringing up, would it have been an interesting sub for Raining in Baltimore? Take Raining out and put August in, right? Would some people have liked that? Interesting. Jeremy, any other comments on August at all before we wrap things up?
No, just a great album, and I think like we talked about a coming of age album. It just and it can mean so many things to so many people, and I think that's the mark of a great album right there. It has so many different meanings, and none of them are wrong, and that's kind of what I love about it. I can talk to you guys, or I can talk to my friends who have listened to it, and we all come up with something different, but it's all great.
All right, Chris, before I say goodbye, I'll leave you with parting thoughts.
Well, all I'll say is I think I'm going to steal Dan's idea after the discussion we've had. I'm going to steal Dan's idea and start giving this to anyone I know who's starting college. I'm just going to be like,
Right.
here you go, man. Don't or lady, you don't know that this record's exactly what you need to hear over the next 4 years right now, but just trust me and just put this on once every few months, and eventually this is really gonna connect. I guarantee it.
Well, thank you so much. Well, we wrapped up our August review, and I really appreciate Dan and Jeremy joining us. And don't worry, or maybe worry, you will get an invitation again at some later podcast. Chris, as always, fantastic job. And so we'll see you next time for episode 3, which the current plan is to talk about how some of the I guess either feelings of or how the different concert eras, right? How they kind of had different feelings, both how they organized, how they did the set list through the years, and we'll have a special guest on that one too. So until next time, see you down at Sullivan Street. Thank you so much.